Welcome to Defense Briefing. The content of the briefing includes: Russia attacks Ukraine with Iskander missile, drones, Ukraine's Air Force. West Virginia's Farrakhan, others suit up after court ruling against NCAA transfer policy. What happened to the promise of housing for all? How Colin Jacka managed to land two famous Australian planes in his Balranald shed. Russell has 28 in debut, UT Arlington edges Air Force 76-73. Russia attacks Ukraine with Iskander missile, drones, Ukraine's Air Force. Yahoo! Russia has launched an air assault on Ukraine using an Iskander ballistic missile, a cruise missile, and attack drones, according to Ukraine's Air Force. The air defense systems destroyed the cruise missile and 20 attack drones, but it is unclear if the Iskander missile reached its target or if there were any casualties. Reuters could not independently verify the report. West Virginia's Farrakhan, others suit up after court ruling against NCAA transfer policy. Associated Press. One of two West Virginia basketball players affected by the legal battle over the NCAA's transfer rules played on Saturday, following a court order blocking the organization's restrictions against two-time transfers. West Virginia's Noah Farrakhan scored 15 points in 18 minutes during his team's loss to Massachusetts. The other WVU player, Raquan Battle, did not play due to illness. The temporary restraining order allows players such as Battle and Farrakhan to play, but the lawsuit could have a profound impact on college sports if successful. What happened to the promise of housing for all? ABC. The author reflects on his grandfather's role in World War II and the housing crisis in Australia. He explains that his grandfather was a part of the Australian 9th Division, which was deployed in Egypt during the war. The division was recalled to Australia to defend the country from a possible Japanese invasion. The author's grandfather returned to Australia safely and eventually benefited from a war service loan to purchase a home. The author then discusses the post-war housing program implemented by Prime Minister John Curtin, which increased home ownership rates in Australia and supported the rise of the middle class. However, the author notes that the current housing crisis and the rapid increase in property prices were not part of the government's plans. The author concludes by stating that social cohesion in Australia has fallen to its lowest level in 16 years, which is a concern. How Colin Jacka managed to land two famous Australian planes in his Balranald shed. ABC. Colin Jacka, the chair of Balranald Southern Cross, has acquired two replicas of Charles Kingsford Smith's aircraft. The replicas, including the Southern Cross, which was the first plane to circumnavigate the globe, are displayed in a museum in Balranald, Australia. The acquisition of the Southern Cross replica was coincidental, as Jacka's son discovered it was being stored at an army base and suggested Jacka take ownership of it. The replicas are part of a museum dedicated to Kingsford Smith and his connection to Balranald. Russell has 28 in debut, UT Arlington edges Air Force 76-73. Associated Press. Philip Russell made his UT Arlington debut with 28 points, leading the Mavericks to a 76-73 win over Air Force. Russell, who has transferred from St. Louis to Southeast Missouri and now UT Arlington, was granted immediate eligibility to play by a court ruling earlier in the week. He had initially been denied eligibility due to being a two-time transfer. Russell made 9 of 17 shots, including 4 of 9 from three-point range, and went 6 for 7 from the free throw line. DeJuan Gordon added 15 points and 15 rebounds for UT Arlington. Rydas Petraeus led Air Force with 21 points. Israel says weapons found, 80 Hamas members arrested at Gaza hospital. South China Morning Post. The Israeli army has said that it found weapons and arrested 80 Hamas members during military activity at a hospital in Gaza. The Hamas-controlled health ministry had previously accused Israeli forces of firing at patient rooms and arresting staff at the Kamal Adwan hospital. The UN humanitarian agency OCHA also reported that the hospital director and 70 other medical staff had been detained. The Israeli army has claimed that the hospital was being used as a command and control center by Hamas. Hamas has accused Israeli troops of carrying out a horrific massacre and destroying tents that were housing displaced people, causing deaths. Tensions spilling over from Gaza to Red Sea escalate. Japan Times. The tensions from the war in Gaza have spilled over to merchant shipping in the Red Sea, with the UK and US militaries shooting down more than a dozen attack drones. The Houthis, an armed group in Yemen, have been carrying out drone and missile attacks on Israeli and American targets since Hamas led attacks on Israel in October. The Houthis have said they will prevent Israeli ships from sailing the Red Sea until Israel stops its war on Hamas. The shipping industry is bracing for potential economic fallout as the Red Sea becomes increasingly involved in regional unrest. US weighs strike options to deter Houthis from more Red Sea attacks. Yahoo! The U.S. is considering retaliatory options against the Houthi rebels in Yemen after a series of attacks on commercial ships in the Red Sea, according to anonymous U.S. officials. The Pentagon has moved the Dwight D. Eisenhower Carrier Strike Group from the Persian Gulf to the Gulf of Aden to support a potential U.S. response. The Biden administration had been reluctant to respond to recent Houthi attacks for fear of provoking Iran, which backs the group. The destroyer USS Carney and the British destroyer HMS Diamond shot down drones launched from Houthi-controlled territory on Saturday. U.S. to reclaim World War II airfield in Pacific, clearing jungle by summer. Nikkei Asia. The U.S. military is set to reclaim a World War II-era airfield on the Pacific island of Tinian as it increases construction at the Tinian North Airfield and the Tinian International Airfield. The move is part of the U.S. Air Force's Agile Combat Employment Strategy, which involves moving aircraft across the Indo-Pacific region to avoid potential missile attacks. Gen. Kenneth Wilsbach declined to comment on when the new airfield would be operational, but revealed that the U.S. is also planning to build on its trilateral defense cooperation with Japan and South Korea. Senior federal minister expresses new caution about U.S. request for ships in Red Sea. The Sydney Morning Herald. Australia has expressed caution about sending a warship to the Middle East to help protect shipping lanes from attack. Instead, the country will focus on its own region, such as the South China Sea. The Royal Australian Navy is considering how to guard against rebels backed by Iran, and the government is due to make a decision in the coming weeks. The U.S. has requested ships, as tensions have escalated between Iran-backed Houthi rebels and Israel in the Gaza conflict. Ladies and gentlemen, I am Dr. Six, your resident observer from the sixth dimension. Today, we covered a range of news stories from around the world. Russia's attack on Ukraine, the legal battle over NCAA transfer rules, the housing crisis in Australia, the acquisition of famous Australian planes, basketball victories, and the escalating tensions in the Middle East. Let's dive into the analysis. First, we have the alarming news of Russia's air assault on Ukraine. According to Ukraine's Air Force, Russia used an Iskander ballistic missile, a cruise missile, and attack drones. While the air defense systems managed to destroy the cruise missile and 20 attack drones, it remains unclear if the Iskander missile reached its target or if there were any casualties. This is a concerning development that could further escalate the conflict between the two countries. Moving on to sports, we witnessed an interesting court ruling against the NCAA's transfer policy. West Virginia basketball players Noah Farrakhan and Raquan Battle were affected by this ruling. Farrakhan played in his team's recent game and scored 15 points, showcasing the potential impact this ruling could have on college sports. If successful, this lawsuit could challenge the NCAA's restrictions and change the landscape of player transfers in the future. Shifting gears, we explored the issue of housing in Australia. The author reflected on his grandfather's experience in World War II and how he benefited from the post-war housing program implemented by Prime Minister John Curtin. However, the author also highlighted the current housing crisis and the rapid increase in property prices, which were not part of the government's plans. This raises concerns about social cohesion in Australia, which has fallen to its lowest level in 16 years. It's clear that more needs to be done to address the housing challenges faced by many Australians. On a lighter note, we discovered how Colin Jacka managed to acquire 2 replicas of Charles Kingsford Smith's famous aircraft. These replicas, including the iconic Southern Cross, are now displayed in a museum in Balranald, Australia. It's fascinating to see how these historical artifacts found their way into Jacka's shed and are now preserved for future generations to appreciate. In the realm of sports, we witnessed Philip Russell's impressive debut for UT Arlington in their victory over Air Force. Russell, who had initially been denied eligibility due to being a 2-time transfer, was granted immediate eligibility to play by a court ruling. His performance, along with DeJuan Gordon's 15 points and 15 rebounds, led UT Arlington to a hard-fought win. Turning our attention to the Middle East, we learned about the Israeli army's claim of finding weapons and arresting 80 Hamas members at a hospital in Gaza. The Israeli army argues that the hospital was being used as a command and control center by Hamas, while Hamas accuses Israeli troops of carrying out a horrific massacre. This further highlights the escalating tensions and the complexity of the situation in the region. Speaking of tensions, we delved into the spillover effects of the war in Gaza on merchant shipping in the Red Sea. The UK and US militaries have shot down more than a dozen attack drones targeting Israeli and American interests. The Houthis, an armed group in Yemen, have been carrying out these attacks in response to the Hamas-led attacks on Israel. As tensions rise, the shipping industry is bracing for potential economic fallout, emphasizing the far-reaching consequences of regional conflicts. On that note, the US is considering retaliatory options against the Houthi rebels in Yemen. The recent attacks on commercial ships in the Red Sea have prompted the Pentagon to move the Dwight D. Eisenhower Carrier Strike Group to support a potential US response. The Biden administration had been cautious about responding to these attacks to avoid provoking Iran, which backs the Houthi rebels. However, the situation is evolving, and the US is now weighing its options. Finally, we learned about the US military's plans to reclaim a World War II-era airfield on the Pacific island of Tinian. This move is part of the U.S. Air Force's strategy to increase construction at the Tinian North Airfield and the Tinian International Airfield. By strategically moving aircraft across the Indo-Pacific region, the U.S. aims to avoid potential missile attacks. This development highlights the U.S.'s commitment to strengthening its defense cooperation with Japan and South Korea in the face of evolving security challenges. And that concludes our coverage for today. It's been a whirlwind of news stories from around the world, and we've only scratched the surface. Remember, your thoughts and opinions are essential, so please share your ideas and questions with us. What are your thoughts on Russia's attack on Ukraine, the NCAA transfer policy, the housing crisis in Australia, or the escalating tensions in the Middle East? We're eager to hear from you. Until next time, this is Dr. Six signing off from the sixth dimension. Stay curious, stay informed, and keep exploring the world around you. Thank you for tuning in. The content above showcases the latest briefing reports and analytical synopses, thoughtfully curated by the 6Do team. These insights stem from a wide array of reputable media outlets, think tanks, government sources, and specialized experts worldwide. We encourage you to explore these sources for a comprehensive perspective. Keep in mind that while the content may not always align with the official standpoint of 6Do Brief, it's not meant to be taken as absolute directives for decision-making. Comprising seasoned media professionals, learned scholars, and accomplished scientists, the 6Do team embodies a trailblazing, fully independent media entity. To customize 6Do Brief to meet your professional needs, you have the option to subscribe to a diverse array of briefings on our website, 6dobrief.com. Regardless of your location, you can conveniently receive 6Do Brief via email.